Sophie. Good morning from Boston and the floor of my hotel room. I'm here for a very short time for a gig. Got in yesterday afternoon and I'm leaving this afternoon, so minor trip out of town. I have been reading. It's been good. We're the 4th of November right now, and November is coming in hot, actually. The train ride yesterday morning was really lovely. Beautiful autumn day, and I think it was actually really good for me to sit and watch landscape for a little while. I think it was actually a very grounding exercise. And I wrote for a while, which was really good for me. Sifting through a lot of feelings of smallness and impotence and fear for my own little life and the world at large. And I read the entirety of The Hour of the Star. This is my second time reading it. I previously read it in English translation, and yesterday I read it in the French translation by Marguerite Wünscher, I think, yes, which was really good. It was nice to reread it I think maybe with all books or with all good books, it really is so good to reread. I keep saying that I need to read books again, and I don't do it because I think most of us have this urge for shiny, new, pretty things, but there's something so profound to be gained from rereading a book. So this is my public service announcement to you and to myself. Go back and reread things, and especially somebody like Lispector, who is so specific and kind of obtuse. I really got a lot out of going over that book again, which I had not adored the first time I read it, and I liked it a lot more. I got a lot more out of it in reading it a second time, and I think reading it in French probably. So that was a really phenomenal exercise for me. Just a morning of having to sit and read and write was kind of just what the doctor ordered. I am meanwhile reading various other books at once. I'm still reading Brian Dillon's Affinities, which is kind of going a little slowly. We'll see if I even finish it by the end of the year at this state. Maybe I won't, which is okay. It's very easy for it to be just chapter by chapter because it's a series of essays and commentaries on specific artworks. So that works very well in an episodic fashion. 2 novels. I am listening currently to Antal Szerb's Journey by Moonlight. This was upon recommendation because I have been reading so much Magda Szabo. So I picked this up and have listened to about 2/3 of it. It's a weird book, weird mood, but it's basically a journey through Europe. We're following a young Hungarian man as he kind of attempts a little bit to be a flâneur in some ways and attempts to grapple with his bourgeois desires and ties and needs, and a desire probably for freedom. It's very much a European novel, kind of turn of the century, modernist, Europeanism, and with a very weird, melancholy, satirical, dry, humorous, sad mood. It's hard to put my finger on what the mood is of the narrative, really. But I'm enjoying it, so thank you to a novella for recommending that in the comments of my previous video, because I am really liking it. So see, you recommend things, I read things, and things are good. And finally, I'm also reading a paper book, which I've mentioned on this channel before because I want to actually finally read some of the books, the prize books that I bought at the very beginning of this year. This is Claudie Hunzinger, Un chien à ma table. I just started, as you can see. It's good so far. We're following a writer, older, middle-aged writer, as she thinks about her life so far. We'll see. It's a very fast read. And that's it. So I have another gig-ish type thing this afternoon, and then I'll be back in New York tonight. So really quick turnaround, but it's been nice to hunt around Boston a little bit. Mostly I've been not doing much tourism, but a little bit of walking around. I met a friend for breakfast this morning in Beacon Hill, and have been taking a lot of videos of pretty houses and a lot of gourds. So I don't know how much of that footage is going to make it into the assemblage of this vlog, but yes. Just filming myself right now. Look at that acting! I never hit record. I was talking to a phone that was not doing anything. All right, hello, howdy. I am giving you a reading update. There's quite a lot to update about because I've actually been really reading. So I don't exactly know what happened. The turnover from October to November kind of, a décliqué quelque chose in me, I don't know how to say this, kind of hinged something in me, and I'm reading quite a lot more, and with a lot more interest, fervor, passion, inspiration, etc. Not all of the above all the time, but closer to it, with more enthusiasm, basically. I should also be noted that I've been sleeping better, which is very much a component, and I'm more of a morning person currently, which also, if you've been watching my vlogs a lot and intently, you know that I've been trying on and off the past year to make better use of my mornings. I'm making somewhat better use of my mornings. The time change somewhat helped, but also it's just stuff and things. So I'm trying to be a little bit more conscientious about how I use my morning and try to do things as soon as I wake up that kind of set me up right, writing, reading. And so far, I mean, I'm doing okay. I give myself a pretty, a mild little clap. So, books. I finished Journey by Moonlight by Antal Szerb. I didn't mention in my previous talk about this book that it's translated by Len Ricks, who's also the translator of all of the Magda Szabo books that I've read. So apparently one of the major Hungarian translator types, it seems, or at least in the books that I'm reading. The book definitely reminded me to a certain extent of Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain. They are written at around the same time period, and they deal with similar things. They deal with the kind of European condition and the tropes of different European countries. In The Magic Mountain, it's different European peoples coming together in a remote and very hermetic place, whereas in Journey by Moonlight, our main character, and to a certain extent characters, are traveling and encountering different types. So we get sort of this like touristic view of Europe through our, especially one character, which is interesting. And so it kind of deals with and plays with kind of demographic tropes to a certain extent. It's also following, in large part, a young man, a young bourgeois man who has a lot of thoughts and feelings about kind of his place in the world and what he wants to do. It's a lot dealing with a lot of similar questions about what to do and how to be. He has some long discussions with an academic acquaintance friend who is telling him that he should also become an academic. It's very satirical of that kind of actually pretty hermetic lifestyle and kind of seemingly pointless lifestyle, which I found very funny and true, still apt today. So that was similar to a lot of the considerations of the different people in Hans Castorp's life in The Magic Mountain. Lot of similarities, and also very much the looming specter of death is so important in both of those books, and of psychology. In the Szerb, it's even more self-destructive. It's less the metaphor of disease and more the appeal of death, the kind of dance of death that takes sometimes the form of suicidal ideation in some of the characters, but also I think it is very much the looming shadow of death in the state of Europe, in how things have been, could be, the kind of an old order falling apart. So there is very much this kind of morbid undercurrent and morbid shadow at the edges, while also being very wry, very funny sometimes, very almost non-committal or dry about certain things, very tossed off. It's a funny atmosphere. I enjoyed the book a lot, ultimately. I also read Un chien à ma table, which I had just barely started the last time I talked to you. This was also very moody. Here we are following a novelist, an older novelist named Sophie, who lives kind of in the woods with her partner, and they come across a dog, a wounded dog, and they take her in. And it's really about that little intimate nucleus of a family unit amidst a world that is deteriorating, the dangers of deteriorating ecology, of violence. It's sort of about the physical, literal oasis of home, and also, of course, the metaphorical, representational, or relational oasis of home as a series of relations. It's about aging, it's about loss, it's about very much about intimacy. There's a lot about the history of this couple, of Sophie and Grieg, their history, the development and evolution of their relationship into older age. There's something very dreamlike about this book. It can be hard to tell. It flits between different times to a certain extent, different places, and it can be kind of hard to tell if certain things are really happening or if they're memories. So there's a very kind of dreamlike quality, very melancholy. I referred to this as a book that was probably going to be good for autumn, and this is definitely a really good between seasons book. It's full of a type of nostalgia, melancholy, and also a lot of nature and nature changing. It definitely situates itself within the nature around the characters a lot. So I was quite pleased with this. It's sad and moving. I don't think it has been translated into English, and I don't know what plans there are to do so. It did well in France. It won the Prix Femina, so I could imagine it being translated. I don't know. But if it ever is, or if you happen to be somebody who speaks French, reads French, I know that il y a des francophones parmi vous. Je vous parle jamais particulièrement directement parce que ma chaîne est plutôt anglophone, bien sûr, mais vous existez, je sais, vous n'êtes pas très nombreux, je crois, mais vous existez, et je vous recommande ce livre. In short, I just recommend this book if you happen to be able to read it. It was a really lovely autumn into winter book, actually. So I'm glad I finally picked it up. Oh wow, I have so many books. Geesh. Two currently reading are Virology by Joseph Osmundson. I mentioned this in a video I did for end of the year tag, as I mentioned that I wanted to get to this finally. This is a series of essays about COVID, about HIV, and other slightly less literal viruses. War, the concept of going viral, activism, and how those various things are imbricated. There's some aspect of illness as metaphor. In fact, he mentions Susan Sontag. So what do pandemics, epidemics, viruses kind of bring out about us as human beings? What are our relational realities, basically, that get explored, dissolved, expanded, exposed, exploded when there is something like the COVID pandemic? What are the things we need as humans? What do we owe one another? What do we lose, etc., etc. I'm finding it very interesting, with dips in and out of my interest. There's not even just between essays, but even within essays. I have found all of the essays interesting and good, and also have found my interest in each of them dipping slightly. I think probably, I've read about half of this, a little bit more actually. I think probably my favorite essay so far in total has been a pretty short one called On HIV and Truvada, or Truvada, I think, which is also about intimacy and HIV activism, trust and partnership and sex rights, which I have found really interesting. Probably my least favorite as a full essay has been on private writing, which is the one right before that. because it's long and involves a lot of his journal entries from 2020, and like it involves a lot of his pandemic journal, and I found myself in and out of attention with that. I'm currently reading on war, which is always appropriate, because unfortunately war is kind of always a fact of life that is more or less kind of in our the forefront of our minds, but right now it is very much in the forefront of my mind, and as I'm imagining in the forefront of yours. And the bellicose nature of countries like the United States. There is a line that really kind of gripped at me about the United States really only planning for war, only wanting to ever invest in war and not in disease prevention, not in healing, but that really it only ever wants to spend money on destruction. And that obviously resonates a whole lot right now. It's not purely, it's only the United States that does this, but also, unfortunately, it feels particularly egregious when you live in the United States. So I'm finding this very interesting, imperfectly interesting, but I'm glad that I'm reading it. And finally, the last book I'm going to talk about is I Fear My Pain Interests You by Stephanie LaCava. This has been on my radar for a little while already, and even more so more recently because of several people reading her. So I decided to take the plunge. I already actually had an ebook loan of this out from the library, but earlier this week I went out to get a physical copy, and the reason why is very delightfully stupid. I wanted the cute cow flap. Look at her! So cute! So yeah, that's honestly like 99% of the reason why I decided to pick up a physical book. This is kind of depressed woman situation. We are following the story of Margot, whose parents are kind of mildly famous in a sort of chaotic, punky sort of situation, or kind of at least countercultural music world. Her grandmother also is in the arts, and she herself is an actor, I think. I'm about 40 pages in, so we're kind of, we started in medias res, and we are kind of getting her story that has taken her to her current situation at the very beginning of the book. It's a little confusing in its narrative. It's a little jumbled, a little imprecise. So you kind of feel like you're listening to somebody tell their story, and they're maybe like a little drunk, and they're giving you just a whole slew of things, and you know, sometimes not being super clear about, oh yes, this person whom I mentioned a little while ago, they are this, they are that. So it's not an extremely clear narrative. Definitely purposefully there's a bit of a like emotional jumble to it, and I haven't read enough to really tell you more than that. I'm finding it compelling. I think I will probably be left, I suspect, I'm not sure. I hope I am wrong about this. I think I might be left somewhat cold, ultimately. I think it's going to not quite permeate into me a lot. There's a certain distance in its disjunct nature and in the kind of pain and chaos of our main character, perhaps, that I think I might always glance at a certain remove. But let's see if I'm wrong. Okay, that's all. Ah.
Salut, je te filme.
Salut. Not a reading update, but more a productivity working update. I spent almost all day inside working like a little goblin on a guest lecture that I'm doing in a couple of days, and it was really, really nice to get work done and to be really enthusiastic about it. I forced my mother to look at some of my slides and graphs because I was really proud of them, and it was just very nice. So I wanted to talk about sometimes I am productive, slowly productive. I was very, very slowly productive, but I did feel good about what I was producing, and it's really nice and heartening to enjoy doing a work and feel that kind of titillation and excitement and kind of sparkle that happens, that synaptic sparkle of, ooh, yes, I thought of something and it's working and it's cool. So that's it. Hello, good evening. I'm gonna finish off the vlog for the week here. It is currently not midnight, but it feels like it. It's something like 6 o'clock. I just got home, I have work to do, and I don't know how I'm going to do it. Especially practicing feels very impossible and very unattractive as a proposition. But I have been doing some more reading of these guys. I'm not done with either of them, but pretty close actually with both. I was listening to Virology yesterday while walking around, and I listened to On Mentors, the 7th essay, which I found really quite moving. It's shorter, and it is about the importance of mentorship and kind of stewardship into the person you're going to be, the life you're going to be. It's specifically about queer mentors, gay mentors, and of course the disastrous effect of HIV/AIDS really depleting an entire generation of queers who could become elder gays, and the author looking for a sort of family lineage. I really like the subtitle of the essay, which is Some Other I Before Me, and just how important it is to find the I, the you that you could be, that you are seeing yourself turn into, that you want to be in previous generations. This is very much about that identity in terms of sexuality, but it's such an important thing in every possible arena, and it's such a disastrous loss to lose generations of a kind of people, of a group of people for that reason, or amongst just, the disaster of losing an entire generation of people, of course. But it has this long felt rooting disastrous effect that is this inability to communicate a lineage of something, a tradition, a culture of something. So whether that is culture as we understand it more along, ethnic or national lines, or a culture along sexuality, for instance, or any other, that longing for connection. It also made me want to reread Alexander Chee's How to Write an Autobiographical Novel, which I read a couple of years ago and really loved, and he talks a fair amount about Chi and about kind of finding that mentorship and familiarity with someone, seeing yourself in books. So I've found that to be a very moving, interesting, walking read. And the following essay on whiteness ended up being more interesting and encompassing more things than I thought it might be. Its subtitle is The Sovereign Freedom to Harm, and it is largely, especially starting from the kind of from medical racism and the inequalities within COVID, the options for, of course, treatment, but also being at risk, even though technically diseases see no race and class and anything else, of course, but that's not how systems work. And so there is no great equalizer, but it turns really into a nice dissection of kind of what it means to be interrogating the things that we take for granted as white people, and the insidious kind of crawling of sovereignty, of harmful sovereignty that we take for granted in a lot of ways. It's very much also about grief and the stereotypical waspy white grief, which must be very controlled and show nothing, show no emotion, and having a detachment from death. I'm going to read a line from the end of the essay. If blackness in America always implies a closeness to death at the hands of a virus or a cop in order to make white people feel further from death, then whiteness in America has always implied and still implies acceptance of this death, a quiet way to murder. The freedom to harm is often invisible. And so that complicity of comfort, and of course comfort is good and comfortable, but what kinds of comfort have what costs, essentially. So I'll probably finish this coming week, and probably I'll wrap it up at some point. I'm about halfway through. I fear my pain interests you. I am, as I said a couple of days ago, not extremely engaged in it. It's extremely readable. It's a very fast, engaging read, in fact. However, I am not emotionally super engaged, which I think is, if not, I should hold the book not like this, but do the proper holding so you actually know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I don't have a super emotional engagement, which I think is partially semi-purposeful, or at the very least kind of unsurprising, because we are really following a kind of hollow disaster protagonist in some ways, somebody whose very existence seems to be just this kind of like ineffable walking wound, and with a family that has, its weird toxic relationships and a lot of addiction and things like this. So kind of that kind of person where you're just like, why aren't you kind of better soldered together? And for the first half of the novel, at least, it's a bit more of a groundwork of that. We are kind of hearing about her childhood and adolescence and what has taken her to this early adulthood place at the beginning of the novel, and for, I think, subsequent. Now we're more into the thick of kind of more active pain and more literal physical pain and physical destruction, which very much is a trope of white femininity, bodily destruction as a means of understanding the world, of fighting against the world, what happens when you are only a body, and also that the kind of body that is really admired and revered and interesting. There is very much this ongoing trope of bodily suffering and bodily destructions as a means of independence, or an attempt at independence, of trying to figure yourself out, that I think we're kind of getting into and probably deconstructing. I suspect, because of the title especially, it's probably actually going to be about that impulse that we as white women tend to have towards that. At least I certainly have, and have so many other white women, young white women, tend to have towards this sort of like self-destruction, but a very exhibitionist, or if not exhibitionist self-destruction, at the very least a self-destruction that gets exhibited well. So even if it's not purposefully exhibitionist, it looks damn good, right? And also the desire that an audience has. Why is an audience drawn to that beautiful destruction? So I have not actually read all of the book yet. I don't know if we're going to get into that, but I do think it's going to kind of get into the aesthetics of that, which I think will be interesting. We'll see. So once again, that'll probably be in some future monthly wrap-up or something. For now, that's all you get about this. Okay. Ciao, ciao. Bye.